is Secure by Design, Usable Security Tooling. Wait. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to hit the next slide. Okay, cool. A little bit about myself. My name is Hon Kwok. I started working in tech as a software engineer at Sumo Logic building observability pipelines a couple years ago. And about half a year ago, I moved into InfoSec, where now I work as a security engineer at Cruise. I build human-centric security experiences on the security products team, and I'll elaborate a little bit more on what I do next. Outside of work, I occasionally write long-form thoughts on my blog, hon.dev, and I'm also on Twitter and can be reached there if you'd like to say hi. Okay, so I joined the world of security about half a year ago, and like at any new job, I walked around the office, shook hands, and did introductions. And most people were a little curious about what my background and what I did specifically. So I say, I did a lot of usability and front-end work previously, and that caught some people's attention. A coworker of mine asked if I could take a look at something he's been working on and maybe help. He showed me this tool that he built for the AppSec team that collected data from recurring scans on internal resources. It was built API first. And then eventually they decided that they want a user interface to make it easier for reasons like discoverability and learnability. And they hacked together a UI. Unfortunately, this UI had a lot of difficulty gaining adoption, and some people just outright avoided it. Someone described it to me as an embarrassment. So unfortunately, the product didn't really represent the value of the work done, and he wanted to fix that. So let me show you some screenshots of the redacted UI. All right, this is the homepage of the application. There's 4 buttons, records, repos, home, file ticket, and a bunch of mysterious empty space as well. So say we click on one of the buttons. All right, we clicked on the repos button. This is a page with a table of a list of all repos we have. And if you clicked on records, you would see nearly the same UI. Not shown in this screenshot is that this table itself has thousands of rows to it, so you can scroll a lot. So let's click on a table row. All right, so clicking on a table row takes you to a resource-specific page and the output of any scans done previously. These 3 pages cover a majority of the application. So let's take that all in. I'm sure some of y'all have thoughts on the UI and UX of this experience, but let's do an exercise on what we've just seen. From there, we can elaborate on why these points can be especially problematic in the context of security tooling. And don't worry about not being a usability expert. As people that touch computers, we're all qualified to form opinions on how we interact with technology. All right, back to the homepage. I'll give you all around 10 seconds to form some opinions on this. All right, so I'm sure a lot of you are thinking about this already, but why is there so much white space? Is like something not loading correctly? Do I have the right permissions to view this in the first place? What's going on? So why not put some information there? If you're using this app for the first time, this does not lend well to understanding what the application does. And that can be really dangerous from a security perspective because it makes the application intimidating from the get-go. All right, here are all the screenshots I showed earlier. And let's take maybe 20 seconds to form some additional opinions on the usability of these. So some things you can take a look at is the general layout of the overall application, the URLs, the white space, et cetera, if it like makes sense to navigate. I'll give you another 10 seconds. All So, why is the home button in the rightmost part of the navigation? This is not a common design pattern, and most websites that use a horizontal navigation bar has a home page as the first button, as a leftmost button. And why is this bad? So security is not always the easiest thing to learn, and having non-standard UI practices changes the context from learning security to learning to use this application and learning to use security. This adds a lot of unnecessary brain cycles to something that is completely unrelated to the original intent of using this application. When you have enough of these seemingly small quirks, they really add up and make the cognitive load of using your application ineffective and slow. Here's another one. Looking at these URLs, they have the same URLs for different pages. So one of the URLs is for the list of all resources, and the other one is resource specific, and they're the exact same. So this suggests that this application does not support deep linking, and that implies that users have to navigate through the entire UI again to get to a specific state. If you see something interesting on a specific resource and want to show a coworker, this coworker would have to navigate to the same page as opposed to you just sending them a link. This might include scrolling through hundreds of rows on the table. Like, that is slow, inefficient, and that just makes it difficult to use again. And it also makes collaboration unnecessarily difficult. All right, so I redesigned and rewrote the entire front end. I fixed all the things noted previously. There's a home page now. There's also a navigation bar that makes sense, and deep linking also exists. But some of the other things that usability improvements that came to be is that the table is a lot more data dense. Previously, information in the table created very tall rows, and it made it very difficult to perform search and scan operations. So previously in the viewport, there were about 2 rows per a window, and now you have a lot more, and this is also blown up. So, yeah, and then it's also easier to digest date time. Previously, you had a lot of information you didn't need, and sometimes you just want human-friendly text. And as people that use UIs, we are humans, and we should be nice to ourselves. If you wanted that information, you can hover over that text and see that information. And lastly, as the unspoken requirement for all security tooling, we have dark theme. All right, so like most security teams, when you find issues and vulnerabilities, you reach out to people in engineering organizations for remediations and fixes. So this happens quite often. And in some of these interactions, the developers got a little curious about this application that all these security engineers were using. So they asked, what is this tool that I don't have access to? Can I get access to it? And how do I get access? So let's stop. We have a mental shift from security folks doing security to engineering and security people doing security. This human-friendly UI empowers people to do and secure things by themselves. We're decreasing friction and we are decreasing friction to security, and it makes all our lives much easier. If you want to build constructive relationships, having user-friendly tools, it helps motivate engineers to champion security tasks. This question represents a shift from reactivity to proactivity around security by enabling your people. And let's remember why we build security products in the first place. We build and maintain these services and tools to enable the rest of the organization to maintain its security posture and culture. So what is usability? In short, it can be broken down into effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction. Notice how nowhere in this definition does it say usability means aesthetics. It doesn't. Oftentimes, usability gets pigeonholed into just visual design, and that's just not true. Things like command line tools can benefit from usability thinking. Git, the version control system, had a recent update where it broke down Git checkout into Git switch and Git restore. Why? Because having one command do 2 different things is confusing and unnecessary. So, would you ever build a security tool that is not effective, not efficient, and not satisfactory? Sounds really dumb, right? So usability should be the top priority for any sort of security decision. All right, UI before API. So Dan is a large figure in the front-end community for his work around React and Redux. He also clarified in this tweet that he uses UI and UX interchangeably. And there's also a great follow-up blog post if you look it up. But as a takeaway from this, let's talk about it more abstractly. So APIs are an abstraction on how a person might do something on a computer. And at the same time, APIs are for machines. Turns out, APIs also create constraints. These constraints enable people to do things. They also prevent people from doing things. And lastly, they enforce people to follow a particular interaction pattern. So let's hold up. Aren't APIs just abstractions for how a human might interact with a computer? APIs are abstractions for how humans interact with computers. But why should we let an abstraction for a machine dictate how we as humans do things? In an ideal world, we need to be thinking about the user first. Also, in an ideal world, usability considerations exist at the start of any security decision. So hopefully, I've sold some of y'all on prioritizing usability in your security tooling. So what are some actionable things that we can do to get the ball rolling? So if you have designers, go talk to them. Become best friends with them. They're really cool people. If your product is internal, your designers already interact with your engineers a lot already. And if your product is external, your designers almost 100% already have a deep understanding of your organization's customers. You can find out what's in place for user research and maybe even find people to champion your cause. Second point is inventory what work already exists. Do you have a component library, a design system? At Cruise, we had a UI kit that a lot of engineers were building with already, but the security team wasn't utilizing it. Using known resources means you're making new experiences feel familiar. People know what interaction patterns exist in their current tooling, so why not use those patterns in your security tooling? By benefiting from these known design patterns, it makes your application less intimidating, easier to learn, and my favorite, less work for me. So for feedback and evaluation of your existing tools, here's what you should do. And it should be a combination of both. So if you're including others in your research, you should do user research, and that means gathering others, doing surveys, doing interviews, getting an idea of how people interact with your application, seeing if anything's confusing, if there's any workflows that you never thought of in the first place. The other thing is a heuristics evaluation. A heuristics evaluation is a usability inspection method used to identify any design issues associated with your user interface. I said Nielsen in parentheses because Nielsen heuristics are 10 very well-known and general principles for interaction design. I have 3 of the 10 listed below. So for example, recognition rather than recall. In the image that I have on my slide, you can see the fonts are displayed in a font in the form of that particular font. So when you choose it, you already have an idea of what it looks like. So let's put this in a security tooling context. Say you're giving someone permissions to access something that requires you to input their email. And you now need to know their entire email before they have access to something. A usability plus that you can add to your form would be autocomplete. Instead of having someone recall and type out the entirety of that email, now a couple keystrokes, and hopefully you can recognize and identify the right person for those access permissions. If you're doing a heuristics evaluation, definitely take a look at Nielsen's heuristics. There are 10, which can be a lot, but focusing on a couple can really help you get started. All right. So if you learn nothing else from this talk, Remember this, effective security is secure by design. Security has a lot of tough and important problems, and unusable solutions gets us nowhere. Let's think of poor design as an inherent flaw or vulnerability to any sort of solution. If you have an unusable security tool and no one wants to use it, and it doesn't really help get the job done, why bother? Why even build an unusable product? I mean, no one starts off writing something and going like, I am going to build an unusable product. No one does that. That's pretty silly. So why do we have unusable products? Well, if you don't prioritize usability from the get-go, it very easily becomes unusable. So effective security is really secured by design. And there's a lot of amazing security products out there. But the work that interfaces with us, the humans, it doesn't really always add up. Your user interfaces should represent the value of your work. As the world discovers how important security is, let's make sure it's effective, efficient, and satisfactory. Thank you all so much for coming to my talk. My name is Han, and I'll be around if you have any questions. Since I finished pretty early, this is also my first conference talk I've ever given, and I wanted to give thanks to a bunch of people that helped me through the process. I'm sure I'm forgetting a bunch of people here, but Anna, James, Brian, Dylan, Nathaniel, Nemesis, Sarah, and so on. A lot of people helped by posting tips on Twitter and whatnot, and I'm sure I'm forgetting so many of you, but thank you so much for coming.